if you want to get over your problems, just get hit in the head real hard. I could have died that day. It's a situation where if the car had hit like a millisecond earlier, my mom would definitely be crushed, and I don't know if I would even be able to make YouTube videos. Something happened to me that changed my entire understanding of what it meant to be me. And I don't mean this in like a religious way. I literally mean it in the most literal medical sense. It's the car accident I was in. This event entirely changed my life, and I've mentioned it in a few other videos. So I just wanted to go into a little more depth here because right now is actually the anniversary of this event. It happened many, many years ago, so please do not worry. I just wanted to sit down here and be open with everyone. And I'm also curious if any of you have had something that totally just changed how you understood how life and identity works, I guess. Me and my mom were hit by a pickup truck at about 60 miles an hour while we were crossing a red light. Luckily, we both survived. We're both all right today, but nothing was the same afterward. It was right after I turned 14, which I realized is a big turning point in a lot of people's lives. It's when they're about to enter high school, become more independent. But unfortunately, this had the opposite impact for me. I'm going to back up a little bit to give you more of an idea of who I was when this happened. So I was a kid who had always been in advanced programs in school. I was in something called the Gifted and Talented program during elementary school, which I know there's a lot of discourse about right now, but rather than talking about that, I do want to say that it gave me this idea that I was somebody who was smart and that I could do anything. And I honestly was not the perfect student at all. There were subjects I struggled with, but overall, I kind of saw myself as somebody who was very capable. However, there were a lot of troubles with the Gifted and Talented program. Things just got a little more messy. So when I went to middle school, I decided it was time to just go back to normal schooling. And it was here that, there's a big adjustment period, but I realized hey, I was I would say average when I was in the gifted program, but here I was oh, I'm actually advanced. I was doing honors work in classes. I was a year ahead in mathematics, and I was the person that a lot of people went to when they had questions. That was 7th grade. When I entered 8th grade, I was more used to everything. I'd figured out a pattern to get things done, and I was ready to just own it. I had a great group of friends. I was on top of my homework. I remember I did this project for history class that the teacher asked me if she could keep as an example to show people in the future. I just, felt really proud of myself. And it was at this point that I decided, maybe I do want to take school a little bit more seriously. Maybe I should go back into the gifted program. And they used to not have one for high school, but one was just starting. I went to go tour that school. They told me about how they had this specialized learning program, how you can really customize your schedule in these ways to focus on the things you were good at and interested in. And at that time, I was I wanted to go into medicine. I specifically wanted to be a brain surgeon because this sounds messed up, but I was really wanted to touch a brain. Don't arrest me. I was excited to get back into more advanced school. However, a little bit after I turned 14, it was the first day of our winter break. My mom took me in the car to go to our allergy shots. Those are shots you get to get resistant to allergies. It was really early morning. I remember that I really hated to go to these shots, especially early on a Saturday morning. To me, that was oh, this is my day to sleep in. Please don't make me go to shots early. But my mom had work, so we need to drive out and then drive back so she could get to work in time. I was Mom, please get me McDonald's breakfast on the way home. And I was hoping that the shots and everything wouldn't take too long so we would have time before her work. I'm tired, sitting in the car. I remember specifically, I have my iPod plugged in to the car speakers, and we are listening to Vocaloid. We stop at a gas station that is right across the street from the doctor's office. We go up to wait to cross the street to and I start putting away my iPod, and that is the last thing I remember. I had woken up. I remember I was so cold. I remember I saw First Bank, which I felt we weren't even near before. I'm why are we by First Bank? At this point, which I didn't realize, is that the entire car was the whole back of it was smashed. Like it literally smashed like a Coke can. Luckily, the front seats where me and my mom were sitting were only mildly crushed. I didn't realize the airbags were out. I didn't realize there was glass. I had no idea what had happened. And I remember I turned to my mom and I asked her what happened. She doesn't remember this to this day. She said her mind was just totally empty until like 5 days after. But I know she did turn to me and she said, I think we were hit. And at that point, I was just so confused. I'm like, why would being hit mean we're cold? Why would we be in front of First Bank? Like, nothing made sense to me. So then an ambulance comes. They are using like what I call jaws of life to get the doors open. And I remember specifically thinking, this is so dramatic. There's absolutely no reason you'd have to use this. Just open the door, which I now know is ridiculous, especially since I saw pictures of the car afterward. They took me into the ambulance and I remember thinking, oh, I'm so tired. It must be because I had to wake up early on a Saturday. And I remember just passing out. Next thing I know, I'm in the hospital. There's a policeman and he's just asking me questions. He's asking, did you run through the light? Did you stop at the light, etc.? And I'm really, really annoyed. They put me into a scanning machine. The lights are just so bright. I am like so nauseous and they bring me a bucket and I just keep throwing up into it. I am in so much pain, especially like my neck and my back. And eventually my dad comes to the hospital. This is where things get a little bit toxic, I will say. Instead of asking me, are you all right? What's going on? He starts telling me a number of seconds. I don't remember them now because it was a long time ago, but he's like, it's this many seconds to go through the light. Tell them you waited this many seconds. Here's the thing. My dad just arrived at the hospital. He doesn't know anything. He went to the light first and he counted exactly how many seconds the red light was for. I didn't understand why at the time. I was just confused. And they're asking me like, are you okay? And they'd put a neck brace on me. And I said, oh, my neck just really hurts. So they took the neck brace off, which to me is a little wild, but okay. Then the second I sit up, I start vomiting again. And then they give me like a bucket to take back home. And we're like not super close to home. We're probably like 30 minutes. And my dad has to drive me home. And I'm just vomiting the whole time. And I'm asking what's going on with my mom. And he says like, oh, they don't know if she's going to be okay. Just really scary. And I'm really worried. But the second I get home, I just crawl into bed and pass out. I wake up maybe 12 hours later. It's nighttime. I can't really figure out what's gone on. At the time, I had pretty severe OCD and I needed to shower multiple times a day. So I immediately go to take a shower. I just get so dizzy. I'm like, I end up going on the floor and I have to like crawl out of the shower. And I'm like on the ground trying to brush my hair. And I remember feeling like my arm is so heavy. My dad ended up coming home really late at night. And he told me that, my mom had a lot of broken ribs. She had a pierced lung, a few other broken bones. My grandma and my aunt fly in from another state and they end up going to see my mom every day. I am so nauseous and I am like super out of it. So every day my dad asks, oh, do you want to come to the hospital? Like I'm barely okay enough to even get out of bed. I'm not up to it. And people start getting upset with me. They're like, your mom could die. You don't even care. But I don't know how to explain this. Like I just didn't understand anything. I was too out of it to understand to even eat. My dad would bring me McDonald's home at nighttime, but often it was like 10, 11 p.m. I was really hungry. So I didn't tell my friends at school that anything had happened. We were on winter break, so we had a good 2 weeks for me to like recover and heal. Some of my online friends found out because a best friend of mine was friends with my online friends and they all knew. So I spent time like on Skype with them and we watched an entire yaoi anime on Junjo Romantica if anybody knows what I'm talking about. But I remember like none of it to this day. We also watched Antique Bakery, which is another yaoi anime. Don't arrest me. I remember wanting to finish watching an anime that I had started beforehand, and it was like a samurai thing. I don't remember what it was called now. They were moving really quickly, and I just ended up throwing up, which is something that had never happened to me before. Anything like movement on the screen, all of this made me really, really sick. Anyway, things ended up blowing up between my aunt, my grandma, and me. Apparently, at the hospital, she had like I think it was a morphine monitor or something like that on her finger or on her hand, and it came off and no alarm went off, which like it's supposed to if something goes wrong. And that's actually how my grandpa died. Like I never met him because that happened, and my aunt saw it and they were like, your mom's in so much trouble, she could die, why aren't you coming? But I really don't know how to explain it. Like I just felt like I couldn't think. And then eventually she comes home, they go home, and it's about time for me to start school again. The teachers knew that I was in an accident, but none of my friends did. I remember being in my first hour, which was a science class. I sat next to this friend who I knew liked sitting next to me because she liked me helping her with the answers. We were doing something with volumes and dividing by 10. Normally, this would just be super, simple. I think it was simple for everyone, but I was like, I don't understand this. Like I couldn't figure out how to move the decimal point. And I was like, well, that's really weird. So then later throughout the day, I realized I was having a lot of trouble paying attention, just understanding classes. And I especially remember in English, which was usually my best subject, I wasn't even absorbing the words on the page. It should have been really concerning for me, but I was just so out of it that I was like, oh, okay. So I just went home every day and slept for a long time. Eventually, the teachers started to say, hey, she was getting A's in school. Now she's getting like D's. She's barely passing. One thing that really bothered me is that in math class, we had a lot of independent work time, but the teacher wouldn't help me during that time. She only wanted me to stay after school. But I was so tired that I couldn't even fathom staying at school longer. I literally would go home and sleep from like 4 p.m. until the next morning I had to wake up to school. Oh, one other upsetting thing is that there was a school play that I was really excited for. I'd been practicing the songs. I'm not saying it was the best, but I definitely worked super, super hard beforehand. I had the teacher be like, oh, I think you're like a shoo-in for one of the leads. And I didn't end up getting it. I did get a side part, luckily, but that was like a big upsetting thing for me. Eventually, I had to actually change my school schedule, so I would no longer be in any of the advanced math or advanced English classes anymore. Finally, my mom was feeling a bit better, and she noticed something was off with me. She also had a brain injury, but she was like getting able to drive again, and she took me to do a neuropsychological exam, which is kind of where they see where your mental state is. This was a pretty upsetting and stressful thing because I was very, very perfectionistic and I felt like I had to get every single thing right. So, for example, they would ask you a question like, oh, we're going to give you these 5 numbers and can you say them in reverse? If I knew I wouldn't get it right, I just would say I didn't know the answer. And afterward, he basically said that based on my answers, it seemed like I was faking and my results were not valid, which was really upsetting to me because I didn't want to be in this state at all. I'd actually totally even forgotten about that school that I was supposed to enroll in to be back in the gifted program. I ended up missing school a lot. One, I will say positive thing that did come of this is I started making a ton more friends. One thing that the accident made me that may account for where I am today is it made me super talkative. I used to have a really rich internal monologue, and now it's extremely hard for me to even form a sentence in my head. I know there are people on the internet who are like, oh my god, there are people without internal monologues. I have one. It's just very confused. Beforehand, I was very perfectionistic, very quiet, always working out exactly what I was going to say, and by the time I worked it out, the conversation would pass me. But now I'm just like chatty, and I was just chatting with everyone all the time. A lot of people who I'd always wanted to be friends with were suddenly friends with me. And I don't know, I became a lot more popular, which is strange. I got called to the principal's office one day, which never happened. I was a super, super good kid, like terrified of getting in trouble. And the principal told me that I needed to get my act together, that I couldn't be acting out, I guess getting bad grades because my mom was in an accident. I'm just thinking, I was in an accident too. I basically got sent to summer school. My grades were actually good enough to pass, so it wasn't an official summer school where you redo the classes, but it was this thing where they send like at-risk students who are going into high school to get them acquainted with the way everything works there. Anyway, I get sent to this summer program. I feel like I could tell a whole story about this, but the short of it is that everybody there but me was like a kind of delinquent. And instead of the regular summer reading book, which I think was like Of Mice and Men, we just had to read a book about why not to do drugs. Eventually I ended up going to high school and I'm really, really struggling. I'm back in all the basic level classes, which is something I've never really done in my life. And honestly, I'm not even really bothered by it, even though the me a year ago would have been super bothered by it because so much of my identity was about, being the smart one, or at least the one who like knew how to do things. I don't know. So I was dealing with a lot of migraines. I was super tired. I had chronic neck pain. I had chronic back pain. I had trouble reading. And I kept having to get pulled out of school to go to like physical therapy and stuff. It was just a very, very hard time in my life. Luckily, a school nurse recommended a program in our state that gave like rehabilitation money to people who had had brain injuries during car accidents. And I was able to get another neuropsych exam where they were basically like, this is indicative of a brain injury because you are like at the 90th, 95th percentile in certain areas, which is good. Like you're better than most of the population. But there's some areas you're literally in the 10th percentile, which usually indicates having some sort of disability. Eventually, I'm like, doing all this rehabilitation while doing school is really hard on me. I want to do online school. This is before COVID. So online school was a more experimental thing. It wasn't like all day classes looking at a screen. Instead, it was a lot of textbooks. You went to like a class once a week, but mostly it was a textbook, and then you would do online quizzes. My parents told me I could do it as long as I set it all up myself because they were busy and they didn't want to figure it out. So yeah, I ended up like setting up my own computer. I ended up turning in all the things, but like I was actually very good about it because I still did like have goals, but they, I would say, had changed a bit. Another huge thing that changed about me is that even though I was dealing with OCD before, it was definitely more about things like talking, just ways I was expressing myself, also things like showering. But I will say it wasn't that organized. My room was kind of a mess. After this, like I literally felt like when I looked at a messy room, my brain just turned into static. I totally changed, like, I don't know, say it, like my aesthetic. I also like would plan every single thing in my life, plan every outfit I was going to wear, every meal I was going to eat, because it was just too much of a mental load on me every day to just figure it out off the cuff. Well, at this time, because of, I guess, the clutterness, I became a lot more interested in design. I'd always done like digital art in the past, but now I was thinking like, how do I make something visually really nice? How do I make it visually stand out? How do I make it clear and understandable? And this is how I started doing a lot of digital art, a lot of digital design. Through these years, I was doing school online, doing my like rehab programs, cognitive therapy. I did a lot of art. I finally went back into school in my senior year, and luckily through online school, I was able to finish up most of the classes I needed, so I could do just like, I think I was only doing like 4 classes or something. One was AP art and one was AP art history because I really wanted to go into art and design. And because of this, luckily, I was able to actually apply to some schools, and I ended up getting into a lot of top art schools along with scholarships. The thing is, I always liked art and design before, but I never thought that that was something like a successful person or a smart person did. I don't know, like this really changed me. Instead of going into medical school, which I know now is something I would have hated, I went into design, and being at home for those years actually allowed me to put together a portfolio that let me get into a very competitive school. I still have issues from this. You may see me make a lot of typos. Sometimes I will forget to edit an entire part of a video. Like my brain just has these gaps in it. It really just makes me think a lot about how people say like, oh, you're the only you, like hold on to who you are. It makes me feel like the us that we hold on to is actually a lot more flexible than we think. And not that it's always like a good thing to totally change, because a lot of this really did mess me up. But I will say that it does change who I am in a way that I'm like very welcome. I feel like, if I decided to go into medical school, I would probably still be in school. And luckily now, like I'm able to have a job, like a full-time job that I enjoy. I have free time. But also maybe the me back then would have hated the me right now. And I don't know. There's also another thing where people talk a lot about how like memories are the most precious thing, and like you can't take objects with you, but you can take memories. I lost a lot of memories from the year before the accident, and also memories from the time afterward. And in my day-to-day life, there's whole sequences of time that I don't remember. I don't think that memory is the most important thing, but what I do think is the most important thing is, how do I say it? Like a deeper sense of satisfaction in what you're living is lining up with, I don't know, what makes you fulfilled and happy about yourself. Oh, you guys probably wonder a little bit about the driver. He was an 18-year-old who had only had his license for a month. He said he had looked down to take some medication, didn't realize there was a light there. This light was coming off of the highway. And there was a very long lawsuit with the insurance. So that lawsuit was very traumatic because when you go through something like that, you have insurance companies, you have court people arguing that you're making everything up, that none of this is real. I sometimes joke that like if you want to get over your problems, just get hit in the head real hard. That is maybe bad advice, but it's kind of true. But also at the same time, it kind of offends me. Like when I was in college, people would say, oh, like, you're so lucky. I want to get hit by a car, but like literally something in my brain changed where I became a different person. And I don't know if that's something that everybody is ready to give up. I also deal with a lot of chronic pain. I have to get a lot of medical procedures every year, deal with a lot of migraines. And luckily we're in a world where technology is advanced in a way where I can get these things. I don't know, I wouldn't recommend chronic pain to anybody. So yeah, this is the story of my car accident. I'm curious if anyone else has been in an accident like this, if anyone else's personality has changed from, either a physical event, like it was literally me hitting my head super hard, or even a traumatic event. I think the comment section can hopefully be a positive place to share that, like, this common knowledge about you never lose your memories, you never lose yourself. That really isn't true, but it also opens up a lot more doors to me somehow. I feel like I don't have to be locked in who I am. I feel a lot more confident to change at any point. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Sorry, this was a lot less flashy. I just wanted to be really honest today because this is a serious thing. And honestly, I could have died that day. It's a situation where if the car had hit like a millisecond earlier, my mom would definitely be crushed. And I don't know if I would even be able to make YouTube videos. Thank you very much for listening. Talk to you guys in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye.